Hello, students. The last aspect of categorical propositions that I'm going to share with you because you need to understand is distribution. I want to clarify something for you that propositions are universal or particular. All right, so the propositions themselves are universal or particular. So for example, as we said before, a type A proposition is universal affirmative. A type E proposition is universal negative. A type I proposition is particular affirmative, and a type O proposition is particular negative. But the individual terms in the proposition have distribution. And so we're going to talk about distribution in this next lecture. So the subject term and the predicate term in each proposition, in each categorical proposition, have a distribution. So when the term itself refers to all, so all of the term or none of the term, then that term is said to be distributed. So for example, if before the subject term you see an all or a no, then the subject term is distributed. If before the predicate term you see a copula that has a not, then the predicate term is distributed. So when the term refers to all or none, then it is distributed. If it refers to some, it is undistributed. So let's go a little bit deeper. So another way of thinking about this is if all the members of the term class are affected by the proposition, then that term is distributed. Otherwise, it's undistributed. So let's look at individual propositions. So you remember that a type A proposition looks like this. All S is P, or it could be all S are P, or all S are none P, because you remember the rule that none goes with the subject or the predicate. Either way, this kind of format, all S, whatever that copula is, but it's an affirmative copula and the predicate, that's a type A proposition. So let's think about and also remember what that looks like in terms of the Euler diagram, where you see that all of S is in P. And I said when we were talking about the diagrams before, that is going to help you with distribution. So let's think about what the distribution of the terms in this proposition are. So in type A propositions, the subject is distributed. Why? Because it's all of S. All of S is being implicated in this proposition. So if you look at that Venn diagram, you see that S is highlighted yellow. All of S is in P. So you would say that S is distributed. Now, what about the predicate? Because both the subject and the predicate have a distribution. In type A propositions, the predicate is undistributed. Why? Because all of S is in P, but if you think about S, if you think about the entire proposition as a donut, right? So imagine you have a donut dough and you roll out the dough, and then you have a cookie cutter that you're going to use to cut out the donut hole. Imagine that S is that the subject is that cookie cutter, and it goes down into the dough and cuts out that section, and you pull that section out. So all of S is pulled out. Do you recognize that what's left is a donut with a hole? And so there is a hole in it, so it's not distributed. So either you understand what I just explained, or you commit it to memory, that in type A propositions, the subject is distributed and the predicate is undistributed. Hopefully the donut analogy helps. Let's use an example to see if that will make it a little bit more clear. Let's use the example, all dogs are mammals. So you hopefully see that this is a type A proposition. You see the all SRP, all subjects are predicates. All right, good. So type A proposition, you already are committing the distribution of the subject and the predicate term to memory. But I want you to think about this, right? All dogs are mammals. The subject is distributed because it's referencing all dogs. And it is true, all dogs are mammals. But if you think about the predicate, there are some mammals that are not dogs, like horses, like cats, like dolphins, right? So that is why the predicate is undistributed. So all dogs are mammals. The subject is distributed because it's referencing all of the class of dogs, but the predicate is not distributed because it's only referencing some mammals. Dogs are some of the entire category that we call mammals. So again, in type A propositions, the subject is distributed, the predicate is undistributed. Let's look at another example from John 3, verse 16, right? So well-known scripture. The B part of that verse says, whoever believes in him will not perish. So remember, we talked about writing in standard form. If you convert this into standard form, there's more than one way to do it, right? But this is how I wanted to translate it into standard form. All who believe in him would be the subject. It's an affirmative copula because this proposition is affirming that they will not perish. And then the predicate is those who will not perish. All right. And what another thing that you could do is to put the brackets. Remember the brackets around those who. And so you would just end up with as the predicate will not perish. So that's the standard form of that proposition. And hopefully you see that this is a type A proposition. And so that the subject is distributed and the predicate is undistributed. So look at the Euler diagram. You see that all who believe in him, subject is in the predicate. Whosoever believe in him will not perish, right? But have everlasting life. But outside of that, the predicate is those who will not perish is undistributed, because there are entities, not human beings though, entities that don't fall into the category of those who believe in him in the sense of the scripture that will not perish. For example, angels, right? They are not being referenced in John 3, verse 16, but they will not perish. The ones who didn't fall with Satan, yeah? So you see the subject is distributed because it's referencing human beings in the whoever. All the humans that believe in him will not perish. But the predicate can also include non-humans that will not perish, like angels. So in type A propositions, the subject is distributed, the predicate is undistributed. Last example, I think, is the last example. Salvation is a free gift. Type A proposition. And you see that salvation is in the category of free gifts, all of salvation. So salvation is a free gift, but there are free gifts that's not salvation. Like if you were to buy me a Rolex, it would be a free gift to me, but it's not salvation. So the subject is distributed, but the predicate is undistributed. And, car, watches, those could be free gifts as well. So let's move on to type E propositions. Remember, type E propositions look like no S is P or no S are P. Look at the Euler diagram, you see that those two categories do not connect at all. So if that's the case, right, what's being referenced is none of S, all of none of S, and all of none of P. Let me say it slower. The type A proposition is referencing to none of S and none of P, all of none. The entire category of it is not in the other thing. So if that's the case, then in type A propositions, both the subject and the predicate are distributed because there is no overlap whatsoever. And that's how the diagrams really help you to see what it looks like. So let's look at an example. No beetles are mammals. Makes sense. There is not one beetle. There's a whole category of beetle. All of them are not in the category of mammals. So you see that no before the subject beetle tells you that none of them are in the category. And then the entire category of mammals is unaffected because there are no beetles in it. So either you understand the explanation or you commit it to memory. Type E propositions, both the subject and the predicate are distributed. Let's move on to type I. So type I propositions, hopefully you're starting to remember what they look like. Some S is P or some S are not, some S are P, some S is P or some S are P. Could also be some none S is P or some S is none P. I'm saying that because I want you to understand all the potential ways that it could look and still be a type I. So type I propositions, the distribution is both the subject and the predicate are undistributed. Why? Because remember, based on the diagram, it's only talking about that little yellow spot right there in the middle, the part of the subject that is also included in the predicate. It's some. Not no all there's no all in this proposition. It's some of S and some of P. So both of them are undistributed. I'm sorry. Both subject and predicate are undistributed. All right. Let's look at an example. This example, some Americans are conservative. So the type I proposition is referencing that little category right there, the category of conservatives that are Americans or Americans that are conservatives, just that little spot. So both the subject and the predicate are undistributed. And the last one is type O. So type O propositions look like this. Some S is not P, or some S are not P, or some version of that. And look at the Euler diagram again. You see that what's being referenced right here is all of the predicate, but only some of the subject. You see that some before the subject? So that means that in type O proposition, the subject is undistributed and the predicate is distributed. Why? Because you see that the predicate circle is undisturbed. And there is a rule here that is going to help you, that whenever there is a negative copula before that predicate, it's a clue to you that it is distributed. In the same way as if there was a negative quantifier qualifier before the subject, then the subject is distributed. I'm sorry. So negative subjects and predicates, distributed. I'm so sorry, I keep saying undistributed. Distributed. So in a type O proposition, the subject is undistributed and the predicate is distributed. So an example, some politicians are not corrupt. You see that negation in the copula, the not, then you know that the predicate is going to be distributed. And the some before the politicians is telling you that the subject is going to be undistributed. So what's being referenced right here is, you see the politicians is only describing the politicians that are not in the group of corrupt persons. So my recommendation is do two things. Try to understand why the subject terms and predicate terms are distributed or undistributed. But if that's not the clearest to you right now, you can always commit the distribution of these propositions to memory. So let's go over them again. Type A propositions, the subject is distributed, the predicate is undistributed. Type E propositions, both subjects and predicate are distributed. Type I propositions, both subject and predicate are undistributed. And type O propositions, the subject is undistributed and the predicate is distributed. And hopefully you see that there is a correlation between the quality and the quantity and the distribution. But don't forget that quality and quantity refer to the proposition itself. So if you see a question that says, the question would say, what is the quality and quantity of the proposition? But if you see what is the distribution of the terms, you are going to write that the subject term is distributed or undistributed, and the predicate term is distributed or undistributed. If you only write, if I say what is the distribution of a type A proposition, and you only write distributed, you're going to get a half point because each term has a distribution. So you have to write subject term is distributed and the predicate term is undistributed. Okay, so happy studying. See you in the next lecture.